Let's get into the nitty-gritties of the match of the week. That is Zambia versus Namibia. Of course, these two teams played each other earlier on in the year at the CHAN Championship, where, of course, it was even Stevens. Apparently, in this game as well, it ended 0-0, and it took the dreaded lottery of spot kicks to decide who qualifies to the next round. And the CLATOUS CHAMA strike proved to be the difference between the two sides after a round of spot kicks, 5 apiece. Joining me for this week's presentation is Richard Katongo. Richard, welcome to the show. Of course, important progression for Beston Chambeshi. Good confidence boost, especially for some of the young players that he has gotten into his ranks.
Well, that's the good thing that we noted about the game against Namibia. Beston is going, taking over from Wedson. It's not easy. So we expected him to really go out there and see what he was going to put up in terms of how to play. And he put in quite a number of new starters, such as Shemio. That was probably the first full debut that he was having. You've got Lyson, you've got the likes of Bid, you've been on the peripherals. But right now they were in the thick of things, playing at the COSAFA tournament, which was not going to be an easy step, but I think they accounted for themselves quite well. They were playing quite some good football, and that was a good starting point. It's important that they avoided the loss, because the loss would have destroyed a lot of things. You would have been thinking of who was going to fall off and who was going to make it. But I think it's important that they won, and going forward, we are yet to see, I think, the best of that unit which Beston has gone with.
All right, so let's get into the tactical play tectonics of that match. That was Zambia versus Namibia, or Namibia versus Zambia. Starting lineup, shall we? Zambia went 4-2-3-1 with, of course, CLATOUS CHAMA playing in the hole. But Ricardo Manetti for Namibia and Red, they actually went 3-5-2 with Dion Hoto and Hallelujah, the shirt number 9, actually leading the line. But let's just look at the selection that Beston Chambeshi actually made. 4-2-3-1. Of course, Martins Kaonga was given a chance to start. Left back Zio Tembo at the back. You've got Billy Mtale there, shirt number 3, and Shemi Mayembe, shirt number 13. The two defensive midfielders were Jack CHIRWA and Benson Sakala. But ultimately, Richard, those three in attack, you've got John Chingandu, who actually plays wide, but who always have that affinity to come inside. You've got Kampamba, who's got the same acumen, and CLATOUS Chamachota and Lazarus Kambole leading the line. Did this score surprise you in any way?
I was sure that Beston was going to start with a 4-4-2, with Ronald Kampamba partnering Lazarus at the top. But to see that he just went for one striker at the top was kind of surprising. But looking at what he was trying to do as far as using a lot of creativity in the middle of the pitch, it is typical Beston style, because Beston is one of those coaches that love to keep the ball on the floor and play a passing game. So that's why maybe he went with those. So at the end of the day, when we look at the application which he did, perhaps it was not surprising at all that he played with those players.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritties. Let's begin to evaluate Zambia's attack in this game against Ricardo Manetti's men. So Zambia in attack. Now, you actually look at this situation. You had Jack CHIRWA, who had the license to roam forward. As you can see, the shirt number 14 goes up the pitch. But, of course, he's being picked up by the defensive midfielder for Namibia. Of course, Namibia playing a 3-5-2. And we've got Fredericks, the shirt number 8, who's actually picking up CLATOUS Chamachota, who's coming deep to actually collect. And let me just turn your attention to that little purple circle on the screen. Martin Kaonga and Dion Hoto. Now, Zambia in possession of the ball, but we actually saw Kaonga actually picking up Hoto wherever he goes. You kind of feel that the instruction was wherever he goes, go. If he goes to drink water, go with him. And in that 3-5-2, you had a situation where the shirt number 9, Hallelujah, was playing on the left-hand side of the pitch. And for Hoto, he was actually playing closer to the line. That caused the Zambian defense to fragment, but we'll talk about that one. But CLATOUS Chamachota coming short there, and you automatically now begin to question, okay, lines of pass going forward. Benson Sakala, shirt number 6, yeah. If he gives the ball to Benson, then it's a negative pass. But for Jack CHIRWA, he's gone up the pitch. And for John Chingandu and Kampamba, they've gone up. And they're tightly marked, as you can see, that five-man midfield for Namibia actually coming to actually contract and make it very difficult for Zambia to actually find spaces in the central areas of the pitch.
Well, Zita, I think one of the things that we saw outstanding in the game was that the Zambia wingers, which we had were going, they are wingers who will have to cut inside. So you find that most of the times they're going from the wings and cutting inside, meaning that on the wings we're not really having that kind of natural winger who was going to get the ball, run with it, and maybe try to get a cross into the opposition area, which made it kind of difficult for the striker to get any supply. And because you see Namibia were actually playing with 3 at the back, but their midfield had about 5 players, meaning the battle in the midfield was kind of tense, and there are too many numbers in the middle of the pack, which Zambia was failing to break down. And I think Jack CHIRWA is ideally not one of those most creative players. If you want to give him the ball, he's not one of those who is able to pick passes and distribution with the ball. So that ultimately affected the supplier in terms of distribution to the top man that we had on the day.
All right, now talking about that, talking about Jack CHIRWA, let's just have a look at the impression he made in terms of the passes and the decisions that he actually made in this game. You actually notice in black, Richard, is that most of the time Jack CHIRWA in particular is actually reversing, and if he goes forward, they're very short passes. But right there, if you're Lazarus Kambole playing that lone striker role, you're already thinking, okay, the whole game, okay, from Jack CHIRWA alone, he only receives 1 pass, and that's the purple arrow up top on your screen, and he actually scuffed that shot, and it was a shot off target into Lazarus Kambole. But again, you probably want to expect more from Jack CHIRWA in that respect.
Definitely, because the role that he was given on that particular day was to make sure that is the link between the top man and the midfield. In the whole of the first half, Lazarus only had about just 1 shot on target, and it was the only pass which he got from Jack. So Jack is the one who was going to be dictating at what pace and to what extent Lazarus was going to be into this game. But as we've seen, Jack most of the time when he gets the ball was either picking a side pass or playing it to the guys who were at his back. And the challenge was Benson is one player who loves to just sit deep in the midfield. So he always had an option on his back, and then going forward, Lazarus was ultimately starved of supply. Ultimately,
perhaps we want Benson Sakala to be maybe a little bit more involved in attack construction.
Yes, that was going to be the best thing to do. But again, Benson obviously had 2 things to think of. There were 5 Namibian midfielders in that place. So if he goes up, and he knows one of the weaknesses that Jack is that he's not the fastest of players. So when he's up the pitch, one has to make sure that he stays behind and covers that midfield row. So that is what I'm sure what Benson had to play around with. And I think sometimes to play it safe, you'll just have to stick and make sure that you get your job done in the middle of the pack. But then the challenge was with Jack to read the game and see how effective he was in as far as making sure that he creates goal scoring passes for opportunities either for Lazarus or the guys that were playing in the wings. And as we said, ultimately we saw a lot of the wingers trying to go inside. This was basically due to lack of supply, because one of the tasks that Jack had was to make sure that when he gets the ball from Ben, he should be able to either put it in the wings or maybe put a pass for Lazarus, so that they try to as much as possible to penetrate into the Namibian defense. That didn't happen, so you saw a lot of them, all of them trying to go into the middle of the field and then trying to get the ball from there.
All right, let's now discuss Namibia and the attack construction. Namibia transition attack. So Ricardo Manetti, well, we know him to actually line up his teams to actually be a thorn in the flesh of their opponents. But let's just look at what they were doing. So 5-man midfield. So they were going to use a mode of attacking that is not man-intensive. As we earlier stated, Dion Hoto, the number 7 for Namibia, would actually play closer to the line or play slightly into the right half pocket. But that little space there, and you have Kaonga, who's actually man-marking him there. But you look at the way the defense is trying to bat, and Shemi Mayembe, he's right. Okay, go up and put pressure on the Namibian wing-back. For Billy Kemtale, the same thing, and Zio Tembo is closing. But look at now that space between the shirt number 20 for Zambia and the shirt number 19. And that's where Namibia would actually throw in a lot of their passes. And they got a good number of crosses, And yes, it was a warning after warning. Namibia constructed, got some opportunities to shoot shots off target, put in a good number of crosses, but they were just not able to connect. But the question is, perhaps Beston Chambeshi should look into that defending.
Yeah, Zeta definitely needs to do that. And you say we need to give the Namibian team the credit because they were quite sharp. What they did was they tried to put their number 7 right on the line because they saw that they knew that when they do that, then they're effectively knocking out Lyson from the game. So he had to stick around that much. In terms of him being an option for the defenders when they get the ball, he was out. And that player, that number 7 for the Namibian number 7 was always on that line. So literally, Kaonga was taken out of the game. Then as Shemi kept pushing up the line, Bidi had to go and cover for him, and then Zio had to make sure that he had to balance. He had to deal with that space that was left, and that is, I think, for me, the only killer instinct which Namibia missed is that their midfielders were not very forward moving in terms of going to utilize that space that was in the Zambian defense. And maybe we saw Namibia putting in a lot of crosses, but there was always, most of the time, there was a 1 versus 2 or 1 versus 3 for their strikers as far as finishing is concerned, which they could not do. But if they had kind of exploited in terms of getting enough bodies in the Zambian defense, they would have maybe been able to put more pressure on our defense.
All right, so we continue dissecting the game that was Zambia versus Namibia. Ended 0-0 in regulation time, 4-3 in favor of the Chipolopolo after post-match penalties. Perhaps this was a game that was characterized by two teams playing a medium press. But let's begin to look at the benefits of that medium press in terms of Zambia's play out. Of course, Zambia was trying to start their attacks from very deep sometimes. And here's the situation. So you have a situation where Zio Tembo is on the ball. Billy Kemtale is free. You've got Hallelujah, the shed number 9, actually pressing, doing a mount press on Shemi Maembe and Billy Kemtale. So essentially you've got a situation where the Zambian defenders, the two central defenders, can actually exchange passes. But as soon as they try to go wide, it becomes a little bit precarious. But in terms of our player, let's talk about Kaonga again. Dion Hoto. Sticking to Dion Hoto like a rush. And up the pitch, you actually see that 5-man midfield for Namibia. And regardless of the 3 central midfielders, plus the 2 wingers coming into central midfield, that made central midfield a very difficult place to actually play. But we have to talk about the shirt number 20 for Zambia, Kaonga. Now, in this game, basically doing the dirty job of man marking and ensuring that Dion Hoto is out of this game. But at the end of the day, in 90 minutes, he actually puts in 2 crosses, the whole 90 minutes. And Shemi was a little bit more adventurous. But again, you want to understand and say, okay, if you go up, who covers for him? Because Benson Sakala and Jack CHIRWA already have a lot of work to do in that. You've got Namibia who are actually playing with 5 across the middle. But most importantly, the shirt number 9, Hallelujah, is actually coming into central midfield and making it 6. So I'm just thinking, that little space again, would we say that it was a good day at the office in terms of risk management for Zambia and how Kaonga played in both attack and defense?
Well, Zeta, I think one of the things that happened in this game is that we see the presence of Zio Tembo coming to pay the dividends, because Zio is one of those players that have played in the Zambian League for a while, and in that team he was one of the senior players. So I'm sure he was able to make sure that he manages how the fullbacks were going forward. Of course, of the two, Shemi is the one who was more adventurous, and perhaps he has the capacity to go up and quickly come back. But for Kaonga, I think he was one of those. That's why the number 7 for Namibia picked on him, because he was more of the timid ones at the back, and he was susceptible to maybe making a mistake or maybe failing to put in a cross that would go through. But ultimately, if you're going to play in this kind of tournament and you need to win, you need wingers that are going to go up and try to put some help in form of crosses or maybe passes in the middle of the park. But when you have got someone who's 90 minutes, 2 crosses, and most of the time is spent at the back man marking a player, then you're definitely doing a disservice, because then in front you are not posing that threat which you are supposed to get into in order to threaten the opponent. So
in the last meeting, it was Watson Nyirenda versus Ricardo Manetti, but the principal difference in the wide areas the last time the two teams met was that Zambia was playing with Augustine Mlenga on the left and Ernest Mbewe on the right. And for Ernest Mbewe, actually gave us that natural width because he's actually right-footed and playing on the right. This we didn't get in this game, and perhaps we saw the problems that were created. And just to pencil that one down and just further discuss it and analyze it, let's talk about Namibia winning the ball back and what they were able to do in terms of dispossessing Zambia and thwarting the Zambian attacks. Now, look at that area of the pitch. The same area of the pitch we are saying 10 players, 5 belonging to Namibia, 2 Zambian white players stacking in. Of course, the conversion of balls are referring to the interceptions that Namibia made in the first half. And in the second half, yes, that is basically the picture. But again, for Beston Chambeshi, I think in this game, that was the examination. Can you unlock a team that plays compact and is centrally compact like that?
I think one of the things that we saw, Zita, as you have alluded, is that with Wedson, it was all about wing play, and he made sure that he got some of the best wingers in the league. You talk about Ernest, who was at his best, and also Augustine. Whereas Beston, in this case, he was not really into the wings. The wings were literally ineffective in this game, because if you look at how many crosses did we see from the wings, and how many attacks did we see arising from runs on the wing? They were literally, we didn't see much of that. Meaning, all the players that he had put on the wings, that was Kelvin Kampamba. Kelvin Kampamba is one of those midfield players who's most creative and most effective when he's in the center of the park. That is why we saw most of the times he was going inside, and he's one of the he's the only Zambian who had about 3 shots off target in the first half, because he was always cutting inside and shooting from that point, because that is what he loves to do. That is how he thrives. So playing him on the wing was a huge disservice in terms of stretching the Namibian defense, so that we can be able to put crosses. Even on the other side, we saw the same. We were seeing John Chingandu had one of these quietest games in the Chipolopolo shirt. He was literally failing to get odd, because one Lyson was supposed to help him in terms of getting access to the balls, not going up. So, and then from the middle of the park, he was not getting any supply, so he was forced to go inside, and then we crowded the central midfield, whereas the wings were left to operate. The Namibians were having, I think, a free day on that aspect.
Anyway, but you come to think of it again, Ricardo Manetti in the last meeting had to find a way of thwarting Zambia's wing play potency, and he did a fairly decent job. And in the last game, again, he went 4-3-3. Yeah. And in this game, he actually goes 3-5-2. Again, he almost dictates. He gave problems to Faxon Kapumbu in the last meeting, and this time around is Kaonga. Is it, maybe let's be fair to Kaonga. Could it be that that was the Namibian game plan? We are going to try to break them from the right.
I think Zita, what I see is that Manetti is a very good with his research about the opponents that he's going to face. I think when he saw the lineup which Zambia picked, you see John Chingan, you see Kelvin Kampamba, and you see Benson Sakara and Jack CHIRWA. He starts to think and analyze that what kind of play these players have. And when I'm sure he looked at the first 11, he knew that most of the attack in terms of Zambia was going to be in the center of the midfield, and he put five players in there, which helped really to make sure that there was a strong cushion which Zambia could not easily penetrate. And also to our disadvantage is that our fullbacks could not read that we were always a man or 2 men down in the middle of the field. So they had to go up. So they had to go up so that they get to have some kind of space for their midfielders. That's why we saw that almost every time either Jack CHIRWA or CLATOUS were having to pass the ball backwards, because the fullbacks were most of the time staying behind instead of going up, so that they try to create options and alternatives in the middle of the field.
Talking about that one, let's begin to look at Namibia's defensive configuration as they were trying to apply their team function defense. Now, look at that situation. CLATOUS CHAMA playmaker for Zambia, coming deep and trying to play a deep playmaking role, but again, very difficult in a sea of Namibian bodies. Again, look at that situation where his passing options are actually reversed. Because if you look at it critically there, the shirt number 5, who is leading the Zambian attack, that's Lazarus Kambole, has actually come short to try to get the ball because he's actually starved. His teammates are finding a problem to get past. And apparently, in such a situation, most of the times you'd see Zambia trying to hook the ball forward. But I'm sure they knew that Lazarus Kambole is not a target man. He's not a big burly striker that is going to hold the ball up for you. So was it a dilemma starting with the wingers first and the kind of striker that Beston Chambeshi had to play with on Saturday?
For Lazarus, it was really a very difficult day. It was absolutely a nightmare because when you're playing alone, you want to see that there is speed on the wings and there is very good creativity in the middle of the park, and I saw that once they get the ball in the middle of the park, they're able to pass it through. But most of the times, he had to come deep into the midfield and try to get a pass or two. But if you're going to play that deep and you're the top, you're the lone striker, then effectively, what are you going to do? How are you going to do? And I think on the other hand, what you see is that it must have been very frustrating because as a striker, all you want to do is to get the ball, put it behind the net. But if you play 20 minutes without getting a single pass, it becomes really difficult. And at the end of the day, you end up looking, in terms of your morale, you saw almost when we went to the penalties, he actually missed the penalty because he was almost out of the game due to lack of supply to him.
Tough day at the office. But perhaps our ray of hope, our silver lining in that difficult game against the brave warriors of Namibia was CLATOUS CHAMA. Of course, he was all over the pitch, making himself difficult to man-mark, to track, and trying to see how he can evade the Namibian 5-man midfield and try to see how he can find spaces in between the channels to actually play. Let's discuss his pass and direction map, shall we? Again, like in the case of CHIRWA, look at the number of times in the black arrows where he's reversing and the distance of the passes. But one driving run again, all game, he makes one, sends one on the edge of the area. Again, another missed opportunity for Zambia. Again, it was easily a man of the match performance, just missing that cherry and that little bit of spice to actually validate that one. Is that you need to give him credit. He worked very hard. Look at his line of passing, but again, no runners beyond him, so he has to reverse. He has to reverse. More often than not, he reversed and he went forward. And perhaps the most positive passes he made, maybe 3. Of course, that one right on the edge of the Namibian area, the driving run, and one pass from the left-hand side onto the edge of the 18 area for Namibia.
Well, Zita, I think what CLATOUS did is he had a lot of the possession, but one thing you have to give to the Namibians is that they are very tactically disciplined players. They were able to see him on the ball, but in terms of giving him space to make forward passes, they made sure that they closed the spaces. So most of the times, he had better options passing the ball backwards, unlike turning and going with the ball forward. And that is how they managed to make sure that his creativity was thwarted every time he had the ball. And the longer they played, and the other players such as Kelvin and John was having a very awful day in terms of application coming into this game. Perhaps maybe he should have been taken off a bit earlier and put a natural winger who's going to make sure that he creates a kind of alternative for CLATOUS. Because if you see the runs that CLATOUS was having, he would rather get the ball from the wing and cut inside, but the options, so he needed someone who was going to be very sharp in terms of running and opening spaces for him. And that is where, again, it comes to what Jack CHIRWA was doing. When CLATOUS gets the ball, what is Jack supposed to do? Where is he supposed to be? And when you see that he has a number of players around him, he, as a creative player in that team, is supposed to make sure that he either gets attention to create space for other players, and then CLATOUS would be able to play. But in that case, CLATOUS was always going to have difficulties. When he gets the ball, Namibians close him out, and there was no way out for him.
All right, so difficult day at the office, but in terms of Zambia's defensive shift, of course, Namibia were centrally compact and getting as many as 9 to 8 bodies behind the ball every time they lost the ball. Let's talk about Zambia winning the ball back, because this is a vital ingredient, of course, for Namibia in terms of their pressing. They were also applying a medium press, and of course the conversion of balls first half. Zambia, again, look at where we are winning the ball back, is that essentially Namibia have got a bit of access into our final third, because look, throughout the game, and they had a couple of opportunities and shots, or actually on target. That's withstanding the crosses. That's notwithstanding the crosses that they were able to make. But right there, they were able to pierce through our midfield, and it comes back to, well, you talked about defensive discipline on the part of the Namibians. What about on the part of the Zambians? Is that picture okay?
Well, this shows that we considered a lot of position in our half, meaning they were managing to cut through our midfield, where you had Jack, CHIRWA and Benson. Now, as I said in the first instance, is that Jack is one of those players who is one-dimensional. It's either he's up or is defending. So most of the times he was finding himself in a quite advanced roles, which was making Benson to have about 2 or 3 players to deal with at most of the instances. Meaning Namibians, that's how come they were managing to pass through our midfield, and then you give it up to Billy Mutale. I think this was one of those games where Zio told him that I would try to sit and manage the area just around the D zone, while Billy, being younger and energetic, was able to run across. Hallelujah was the main target for the Namibians. So Billy is quite physical, and so he was able to match the supply which the Namibians had. Otherwise, our midfield going into the next match at the semi-finals, we need to make sure that we are quite compact in the middle of the field to ensure that we don't allow a lot of passes to pass through and give access to our goal area to the opponents.
All right, so that was our analysis of Zambia versus Namibia.